Hello everyone, I'm John Evans. Welcome to another episode of One on One. This week's interview is with Vivian Howard, a familiar face and name to many of you. She's the star of A Chef's Life TV series that runs on PBS stations all across the country. She and her husband Ben have owned and operated the award-winning Chef and the Farmer restaurant in Kinston for more than a decade. They opened the Boiler Room Oyster Bar not long afterwards, and their plans are to open a bakery in Kinston sometime in 2018. But more immediate are their plans to open a pizzeria in Wilmington. Any day now, really, that'll be open for business. We talked about that during the interview, along with the first cookbook Vivian released in 2016 called Deep Run Roots. She has plans to possibly put another one on the market soon. You'll hear more about that, and her experiences both here in North Carolina and in New York City. Before we get to the interview, though, I want to tell you about a chance you have to win a WECT travel mug. And all you have to do is listen to this week's episode and leave a rating or a review. Whether you listen on iTunes or SoundCloud or Stitcher Radio, it's easy. All of that coming up after this week's episode. But first, let's get to that interview with Vivian Howard. And we began by talking about Benny's Big Time Pizzeria and their plans to open that restaurant in the South Front community of Wilmington. You've got Chef and the Farmer. Mm-hmm. You opened your oyster bar. You're getting ready to open a bakery now in Kinston. Why did you decide to expand and open a pizzeria in Wilmington?
Well, we like Wilmington. We want to continue to invest in Eastern North Carolina. Wilmington is growing even without without my television presence. I know that sounds like a weird answer, but Kinston is a small town.
Oh yeah.
And we have seen a tremendous influx of tourists related to our television show. And, our businesses in town, in large part, they depend on those tourists.
Yeah.
But let's say Vivian decides she doesn't want to be on TV anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Ben and I both have concerns about what that means for the health of our businesses in Kinston.
Sure.
So we feel like Wilmington is a city that's population's growing. It's a nice place to be.
Yeah.
And it's in Eastern North Carolina. And also, we don't get as much traffic from Wilmington. If we were to open a restaurant in Raleigh, for instance, we would cannibalize a lot of our business in Kinston. Mm-hmm. And we feel like it won't be as much opening one in Wilmington.
And you're opening in the South Front area,
yes,
which is an area that has some new home sites and is a growing area in a growing city. Did you want to target that area specifically?
Well, we couldn't afford a place downtown, and we are both really into the idea of emerging neighborhoods and helping turn things around and being pioneers in an area. And what they did with the apartments there at the South Front district is really phenomenal, and so it just seemed like a good fit for us.
And pizzeria, Benny's Big Time Pizzeria. What are people going to see when they walk in?
Well, Ben is my husband,
right?
And
yeah.
Benny has long been his nickname from his friends.
Okay.
And Big Time has always been my nickname from my dad.
Right.
And so Benny's is going to be a pizzeria with, we have 2 wood-burning ovens. We're doing handmade pasta, antipasti. We have a little fried section on the menu. We want it to be fun and a place that you would come for a night out with your girlfriends, or you would come with your kids. It's casual. We have some really cool artwork that's kind of like pop, artsy, mid-century looking that relates to pizza. We have a pizza a slice of pizza on the front of the building that I believe has a blue crust, if that tells you anything.
So it's definitely not going to be something that you get delivered in a box. This is an entire new concept kind of thing, right?
Well, we hope to do takeout.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay,
yeah,
cool. Nice.
Yeah, and we actually, I wish I had brought a box today. Our pizza boxes are the coolest pizza
nice.
boxes I've ever seen.
Nice. Is it a plan to go different than what you've done before? I mean, because you cook with ingredients, and the show is around ingredients, and the oyster bar is the fish kind of, and this is different though. So you plan to go the different way? Is that what the plan was?
Well, I resist the urge to cook Italian food all the time. I love making pasta. Ben and we had a fire at Chef and the Farmer about 5 years ago. And when we were rebuilding, we put in a wood-burning oven because we both love pizza so much. And the best option in Kinston is Papa John's.
Oh, okay.
So this is something we've talked about for a long time. We talked about possibly doing it in Kinston. I'm not sure the population there could support it. So, I believe this is probably our last conceptual evolution. If we were to open another restaurant here, it would be something that we'd already done, probably.
Talk to me about Deep Run, North Carolina. Like your book says, Deep Run has roots. It has family roots. And what did you learn about Deep Run growing up there?
Well, I think Deep Run has about 500 people.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a little bigger than that.
No, Pink Hill maybe.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
But there's growing up, it was a bustling farming community that really survived off tobacco. And over the years, Deep Run has kind of shrunk. We don't have a stoplight anymore.
Uh-oh.
We used to have a grocery store called Chi-Chi's Number 2. That's no longer there. But it's where I grew up. It's where I live now.
Right.
I live across the road from my parents in the house I grew up in. And so it's the place that I call home, and I get tremendous pleasure and emotion from knowing that my children are growing up, like looking at the same oak tree I looked at as a kid. It's an unusual feeling in today's world.
What was Vivian like as a young lady growing up there? South Lenore was the high school I take it you went to?
Yeah, but I left when I was 14. I went to boarding school.
Okay.
What was Vivian like as a young lady? Very outgoing. Loved to entertain. I loved to make people laugh. I was the baby. I have 3 sisters, and I'm 10 years younger than the sister closest to my age.
Okay.
So I was always kind of like on stage to entertain my family, and that's stayed with me throughout my life.
Did you have aspirations? Were you wanting to cook? I know you went to NC State. I believe you were going to pursue journalism, right? Is that what it was?
No, I never thought of cooking as something that would be okay to do professionally. That was like, in my family, it was, we could be a farmer, a doctor, a teacher, a lawyer, a nurse, maybe.
Okay.
And cooking was not something that I considered, but I became interested in television journalism when I was in college, and I had an internship at CBS Sunday Morning, and that was the path that I wanted to pursue. But it took me a long time to get there, I guess.
What sent you to New York? I know you said you wanted to leave North Carolina and you wanted to get out. And was it the internship in New York that pushed you toward that big city?
Well, I had a sister who lived there.
Okay.
And so when I had the internship, I just fell in love with the city. I loved the food scene. I loved, I worked on like 59th Street, and I lived on 113th, and I'd say three out of 5 nights in a week I would walk all the way home and just like take in the sights and the smells and the people, and I loved everything about it for a period of time.
Right. And you were there, you went to culinary school there, I believe, did you not?
Yes.
What was that like? I mean, was that in the plan once you decided you wanted to go? When you moved to New York, was it to pursue food?
No. When I moved to New York, I got a job in advertising. I worked on the Pantene account. And 9/11 happened about
Right.
a year and a half into my time there, and a lot of people were re-evaluating what they did for their careers, knowing that you could go to work and never come home. And so I decided that I did not want to do that. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I still believed that I wanted to write in some capacity. And so I quit my job. I walked dogs for a period of time. I was a cocktail waitress. I eventually got a job in a restaurant in the West Village that was opening. And the concept of it was Southern food via Africa. And the chef was just a walking encyclopedia of food history and a great storyteller. And so I began to see where maybe I could combine my love for food and my love for storytelling as a career, possibly as a food writer.
Okay.
And so I started cooking in that restaurant during the day before my shift on the floor at night, as a means to get a behind-the-scenes look at what it meant to work in a kitchen.
And was that one of your biggest influences in New York City? Was that person you met there? Were there other
Yes.
major influences in the Big Apple?
Well, Scott Barton is that gentleman's name. Other chefs that I worked for, Wiley Dufresne, I would call his kitchen culture a big influence on me. And, you know, New York can be, there's a lot of people around you, but it can be a very, very lonely place. And when I had lived in New York like 3 years before I started working in that restaurant, and that experience working in that restaurant really marked, you know, the first time that I felt as if I had a group of friends and a life, if
Nice.
you will.
Yeah.
So I would credit that restaurant with making my experience in New York really positive.
I don't want to get off track here, but you mentioned 9/11. What are your memories of that day? I don't want to get too off track of your career and everything, but you were in the city, I take it.
Yeah.
So what were your memories of that day?
So at the time, I lived with my college roommate. We shared a bedroom. We had 2 twin beds next to each other.
Oh, there you go.
And we walked to the subway every morning together. And this, on 9/11, I remember walking to the subway, and it was like the clearest blue sky and crisp air, and there was, you know, excitement around it being early fall. And Betsy was my roommate's name. We both had on the same shirt, and it had a little tie on the side.
Right.
And we got on the subway. I went to my office at Gray, and I was at my desk, and I remember someone running down the hall saying, "Turn on the TV." And we turned on the TV, and we were on 53rd Street.
Right.
And then they said, "No, let's go up to the roof." And everybody was trying to get up to the roof to see what had happened. And then the second plane hit. And then it was just kind of like mass hysteria.
Yeah.
And everyone was trying to get down the elevators and running down 3rd Avenue.
What floor were you on in your building? Do
I
you
think
remember?
like the 20th floor or something.
So still high up, but not as high as it might have taken you a long time to get down.
Right, but we didn't understand what was happening. And I
Right.
think that was the fear of everyone. And when we're out in the streets running, you know, every time a plane would fly over, everybody would duck.
Right.
And I went to a friend's apartment whose roommate worked in the World Trade Center.
Oh, boy.
And so we were going there to see if her friend came home. And by chance, she was getting off the subway at the World Trade Center when the first plane hit.
Wow.
So she left and was fine. But that night, the streets were completely empty, like not a taxi, not a person. And I don't know that it's ever been that way in New York.
Yeah. One of those memories, though, you'll never, ever forget. The day,
Never,
the
never.
smell, the everything that happened that day.
Never.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. You were making soup in your bathtub at one point in time?
No. That's So I was making soup on the stove.
Oh, okay.
And then filling our bathtub up with ice.
Oh, okay.
And sitting the pots down in the bathtub to cool them down.
Oh, okay.
And
Because the story is that you were making soup in the
that
bathtub.
I never said that. We were making soup and then chilling it down in our bathtub.
Gotcha. And what was all that? What were you doing that for?
We had Ben and I had a little soup business on the side where on Sunday I would send an email out to all of our customers that started with just friends and say, these are the soups I'm making this week. This is the day we'll deliver them, and please send me your orders. And it was just this little side hustle we had that kind of evolved into something bigger, and it was certainly a lot of fun for Ben and I, and was our first foray, I guess, into being an entrepreneur.
That's what I was going to ask you. Was that maybe first step in the, not only the Ben and Vivian, but Ben and Vivian business kind of thing?
Yeah, and I had never been a great employee. I was always okay, but never kind of working to my full potential. Mm-hmm. And I found in this soup business that I was working harder than I worked at any of my other jobs, and I took more care with what I was preparing, and no one was telling me what to do, and I liked that.
Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, so I think some people are better at working for themselves than working for other people.
What was it like to leave New York City? Now, I know you made the decision to leave, but what was it actually like to leave the city? You'd been there for a while. You said you had people that were influential on you, but what was it like to actually leave after a time? And what caused your departure?
Well, I had city fatigue when we left, and I felt as if I was ready to leave. But leaving and moving back to Eastern North Carolina felt like some measure of failure. And that felt, that never feels good.
Sure.
But it was sad. I remember sitting on our fire escape and packing up the last few things and just crying and feeling as if, okay, I'm closing this chapter in my life, and I didn't do as much with it as I had hoped when I moved here.
Did you already have plans on opening a restaurant when you came back to Eastern North Carolina?
Yeah, that's why we were coming back.
Right.
Our little soup business had evolved into this opportunity to open a brick and mortar storefront without a bathtub and
chill it properly.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But what you don't know is what we were doing is the proper way to chill something that's a large batch of something down.
Well, good.
You would do it in a sink, not a bathtub.
Right.
But yeah, and my family caught wind of the possibility that we might put down actual roots in the city, and that was not something that they had ever planned. Mm-hmm. And so they offered to help us open a restaurant in North Carolina, anywhere in North Carolina. And so we were like, oh, cool, Asheville would be awesome, or Durham. And then we moved home, and it became clear that we could open a restaurant anywhere inside this building that had already been purchased in downtown Kinston.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, and what was the process of then getting that ready?
Well, it took about a year, because while Ben and I had worked in a lot of restaurants, we had never had real leadership experience in any of them. And we certainly never built a restaurant. And we worked in restaurants in New York that had, deep pockets, and lots of money went into design of the dining room and kitchen design, and we didn't have any money. Right. And so it was a frustrating experience because we had expectations that we could not meet.
Right. I talked to Keith Rhodes for one of my podcasts a while back, and he talked about how important it is for him to support local. Where did that concept come with you? What drove you to want to do that same kind of thing?
Well, as I said before, I left home when I was 14, mm-hmm. and when I left, the economy of Lenoir County was not awful. There was tobacco was still strong, textiles was strong. And then when we moved back, it was like there had been a tremendous brain drain, a mass exodus of everyone who could leave had left, mm-hmm. and it was very sad. And at the time, the farm to fork movement had not actually started. There was like one restaurant in New York called Blue Hill that was really doing it, and Ben and I were both big fans of it. And so we decided that we would just do our best to help make our little pocket of North Carolina a place that was made up of small family farms again, but not farms that grew tobacco, but farms that grew produce and proteins, and that sounds like a lofty idea, but when you're 26, you kind of feel like you can do anything.
Sure.
And supporting local for us has always been about making our community more of a community.
Right. Do you think that is one of the reasons why it's been so successful, the local support?
Yeah.
Not only you supporting the farmers, but then the community turning right around and supporting you in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that local support is something that we used to be at the core of the way we lived in this country.
Yeah.
People owned small businesses. If someone came into your business, you went into their business.
Mm-hmm.
But when hardware stores and fish markets and bakeries were replaced by Walmarts, you don't have that same connection to Sam Wall or whatever his name is.
Sure, or the meat market down the street that you used to go down to.
Right. So we failed for a long time to understand the importance of spending your dollar where you live and with someone who you know. And I think that it's really just a return to our roots as a society, buying things locally.
When did you get the idea that Chef and the Farmer was successful, was going well? Did it take you 6 months, 9 months, a year? When did you finally sit back and say, I think we've created something really good here?
Well, in 2008, when the economy crashed, and Ben and I were still not completely sold on the idea of staying in Lenoir County, but I had acquaintances who had what I thought were good restaurants in the Triangle and at the coast, and they're saying, we served 5 people last night, we served 20 people last night, and I'm thinking, well, we were full last night. And so Ben and I, sat back and thought, okay, we've got something that's working here when a lot of other things aren't working.
Yeah.
And you have to take notice of that. So I would say that was the moment.
Yeah.
When we realized that we had done something right. And then about a year later, the News and Observer reviewed Chef and the Farmer and gave it 4.5 stars. And it was really the first time they had ever reviewed a restaurant that wasn't in the Triangle. And for me, that was validation that I was not faking my work.
Right. No, and it's good to have others recognize it, especially
Yes.
not right in Kinston. The Free Press is one thing, but the N&O in Raleigh is a different story.
Right. People had always said, and it bothered me from the beginning, people had always said, this is a good restaurant for Kinston. And I'm like, that's not
a good
what
restaurant anyway.
Yeah, that's not what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
We think this is a good restaurant for anywhere. And I guess we just needed to hear that.
Yeah. Your dad, one of the things is that your father walks out into the parking lot and looks at all the license plates.
No, he doesn't walk out. He drives around the
He
parking lot.
drives around the parking lot?
Yes, very slowly, and identifies where the license plates are from. That's one of his greatest joys.
How proud are Mom and Dad of Vivian and Ben and the family and what you've been able to accomplish?
My dad comes to our house every morning as we're getting our kids ready for school, and on Friday mornings, he brings my kids a sausage biscuit, and I'd say half of our conversations end with him telling me how proud he is of me.
Nice.
So, and that's, for me, one of the things that feels the best about all of this is making your parents proud and seeing the joy that your success can bring them.
And having your kids grow up around their grandparents, when a lot of times these days, children move away and they're separated from grandparents. That's got to be a joy for you as well.
It's the greatest gift to see the effect my children have on my parents, and the effect my parents have on my children.
Where did the concept of a chef's life begin?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I had wanted to be a writer, a storyteller, and I wanted to make a documentary about the dying food traditions of Eastern North Carolina. And I did not think that I would be in it. I thought that I would produce it, write it, determine the content. And so I contacted my friend who grew up in Pink Hill.
Right.
But she was living in Durham at the time, and she had made a film called Tobacco Money Feeds My Family. And I really appreciated the way she portrayed the people of Eastern North Carolina, not as country bumpkins who are chewing on their toenails, and not as mystical fairies.
Right.
They're people with, with wisdom and also faults and complex people. And I knew that I wanted her to do this. And I also knew she was the only filmmaker I knew.
Well, that's convenient.
Yeah. And so I just called her one day and told her what I wanted to do, and asked if she'd be interested in being my partner. And she said sure, that we would play around. And so they came down, she and her partner Rex came down, and they shot. We were going to shoot something around the tradition of putting up corn. Mm-hmm. And we had a little corn parade in Deep Run that was 3 blocks long.
Wow.
And it was on July 4th. And then after that, my family went home, and we all put up corn.
Mm-hmm.
And I just turned and talked to the camera, because I was essentially talking to Cynthia,
sure,
the filmmaker, and the style of the show kind of evolved out of that.
You're very comfortable. Were you comfortable from that because you knew it was her behind the camera? Is that where the comfort factor came in?
Yeah, it felt very safe because I knew her, and I just pretended like I was talking to a friend. And I also didn't think anybody was going to ever see it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I still, when we were doing that first, corn episode, I didn't think that I would be in it. Mm-hmm. So it just felt very safe. And then when we decided that I would be in it, I took comfort in the fact that no one was ever going to see it.
Well, and you paid for it out of your own pocket the first year. So, I mean, you paid for it yourselves, I guess is the term.
Well, we invested money in it, yes.
Yeah.
But we also did an IndieGoGo style campaign where we raised about $50,000. But we did not raise the budget the first year. And because of that, a lot of the people who worked on the show the first year did not get paid. And they knew that they may not, but they believed in what we were doing and said they wanted to do it anyway.
You do it, you get the project underway, and you try to get it sold. How did the sale come about, and what was the phone call like when somebody finally picked it up?
Well, no one bought it. So just so we're clear, PBS doesn't invest in shows.
Okay.
So what happens is, we sent it to South Carolina Public Television, and they have a reputation for being a presenting station for shows that are distributed nationally. And so they said, okay, we think we like this. We want to show it to national PBS. So they showed our little 11-minute sizzle reel to national PBS, and national PBS said, we think we like this. But what they need to do is make 13 of them. They all need to be, 24 minutes long, and then we'll consider distributing it. There was never any money exchanged except when you're a PBS show, you pay your presenting station to present your station. So the money went in the opposite direction.
Gotcha, okay.
And that's how PBS has long been perceived as a network without influence. There's no brands, there's no money exchange.
Right.
It's really television that's meant to make people's lives better.
When you got the call that they wanted to distribute it, then let me take that phone call. Okay, tell me about that phone call when they came and said, "Yeah, okay, we'll do this."
It was really exciting.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, I didn't think anybody was going to see it. And we had leveraged a lot by making it. When you're filming in your restaurant a TV show, and there's no home for it, and it doesn't make really sense that you would be making a TV show. Your diners look at you like you're insane. Your staff, whose job is made more difficult because you're in their workspace filming, is disgruntled. And so, and we had assumed tremendous exposure based on, filming with my family and filming in our business. And to hear that it was going to have a platform was tremendous.
Yeah. Satisfaction or excitement or, now we got to keep going. All three.
I don't think satisfaction. I'm never satisfied.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. It's such a bad. It's just a thing.
Okay.
But definitely some validation, excitement, a fair amount of fear, because we were private people about to be public people.
Sure. Peabody Award, Daytime Emmy.
Yeah, the Peabody Award happened after that first season.
Yeah.
And in large part, that's what allowed us to keep going, because, getting sponsors for the show had been very, very hard. But winning a Peabody Award, which is very, very rare, gave us, a track record that not many shows have.
Yeah.
So we were able to take that to sponsors and raise some funds to make the show.
You said, I saw a video, you said after winning the Peabody Award, you were on a panel. I watched the video, and you said you think the American South is often portrayed by mass media as caricatures of ourselves. We fit into this little box where we are ignorant and can't speak well. You said your show is important because there is wisdom in all corners of our country and our world. Was that what you wanted to portray, or were you just having fun in a kitchen?
No, that's absolutely what we set out to do.
Okay.
Cynthia and I are both, from Eastern North Carolina, and feel disgruntled that people outside the South watch television that shows us all as like, Here Comes Honey Boo Boo, mm-hmm. or Duck Dynasty. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with those shows, but that's not the full story. And so we were very calculated about that message, showing rural Southerners as people with a skill set and wisdom that urban folks do not necessarily have. Mm-hmm. We were also very calculated about showing what it's actually like to work in a kitchen, because often on television, kitchen work or professional kitchen work is shown as like some sort of glamorous job that it is not. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so we were very, we knew that that's what we were trying to do.
You said, though, I think that you're uncomfortable with the local hero title. I think you told the New York Times that. Maybe not necessarily local hero, but are you...
Savior?
Well, proud to be out front to help Southern cooking move forward, I guess, is that the way I want to phrase it?
It's not something I set out to do necessarily, mm-hmm. To represent a region or to drive tourism to a region. And so, but I'm really proud to be a person who's doing it.
Right.
There's a certain amount of burden associated with that.
Oh, I can imagine.
That feels as if, I don't really have a choice as to whether or not I continue, Sure. People depend on you.
Sure. What kind of feedback do you get? I mean, you're in New York, LA, Boston, Washington, Minneapolis, Dallas, Chicago. Is the feedback different from different parts of the country for you?
I think that we're popular in different parts of the country with people who care about where their food comes from, or people who grew up in the South and now live elsewhere, or women who have twins.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So, I've been on the road a lot because I wrote a
Sure.
book.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
those are the people that, they come up in the line and they tell me what draws them to the show. So, I think our number one market 2 years ago was Portland, Oregon. And it was the strangest thing.
Yeah. That's about as far away geographically as you can get from Deep Run and Kinston, North Carolina.
Right. But what's interesting about Portland is that they're a very food conscious, farm conscious community.
Well, there you go. There's a great tie-in.
The show appeals to them.
I know it's kind of chronicled along, but what did having children do for you and Ben and your lifestyle, your businesses, and the family?
Having children, I think most people who have children would tell you that it changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it has, for me, being a working mom means one thing, and that's guilt.
Watch that.
Well, when I'm not with my kids, I feel guilty, and when I am not at work, I feel guilty, because in some way I'm letting someone down on either end of that equation.
Okay.
But I don't feel guilty enough to stop doing either one.
Right. Yes. There are what kind of I'm going to call characters are your children? Do they like grandma and grandpa? They want to be with grandma and grandpa. They play out in the yard. Any impact at all by cameras, bright lights, anything like that?
So our crew that shoots the show is very low impact. We don't use any lights or anything, and it's the same people have been shooting it since the very beginning. And,
okay.
And we started shooting the show when my kids were 3 months old.
Right.
So we will literally be in our television in our house is in our bedroom, and we will literally be sitting on the bed watching TV, and the camera crew will come in with their cameras on, and my children won't even look at them.
Yeah, so they're not bothered by
They're not
any
bothered by them. And I know that's strange, and they've also spent every holiday that we've had, like 3 or 4 years ago, we filmed Christmas. We did a Christmas
Right.
special, and we didn't have a fake Christmas. The crew was with us on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and the crew that Cynthia and Rex have children. So their children were with us on Christmas. So it's this weird family dynamic that we have. And my children are both incredibly outgoing, I would say. My son is obsessed with, he gets very obsessed with things. And
Right.
for about a year, he was obsessed with the American presidents and can name all of them. If you call out a number, he can tell you right away what number it is and tell you
Wow.
all kinds of facts about the presidents, about their wives, who was almost assassinated. It's really, really interesting. And now his obsession has shifted to music legends. And so
Wow.
we're reading about all the music legends. Last night we watched We Are the World, We Are the
Okay,
Children.
yeah.
And he's pointing out all the different musicians. And his favorite is
Wow.
Michael Jackson.
Oh, there you go.
He dresses
So
up like...
he's got good taste.
Yes. He dresses up like Michael Jackson, and he watches tutorials on YouTube on how to dance like Smooth Criminal. And my daughter's very into DIY anything.
There
So
you
she's
go.
making crafts out of paper bowls this morning when I left.
When you get feedback on the show, is it because of ingredients, recipes, characters? What do you hear about the most?
I'd say the number one thing that I hear is the family thread. People are really drawn to the fact that it's wholesome. It's something that that they can watch as a family. They love seeing my parents and my interactions with my parents.
Yeah.
They love seeing my kids.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people who grew up on farms or grew up in the South respond to the agriculture element of it or the historical rural element.
But there's got to be characters. I mean, some of the characters that are on there, the lady,
Lily
my gosh.
and Warren, and yeah, I mean, they have a whole fan base all their own. And Miss Lily, the first time she was on the show, she taught me to make biscuits, and she kind of schools me and tells me to get
Right.
my hand out of the biscuit bowl because I'm making such a mess. And so now she teaches a lot of biscuit making classes.
That's just
for
awesome.
People who come to town.
That's
and
awesome.
She talks to them just like she talked to me.
That is, I mean, it is, and I think, I mean, I've been in Eastern North Carolina for 25 years now, and worked and covered baseball games at Granger Stadium in Kinston years and years ago. And if you're in this part of the state for long enough, you find those characters everywhere.
Yes.
But you're actually helping introduce them to such a larger audience. That's one of the things that I like so much about the show. I'm not a great cook. I eat well, but I'm not a great cook. I find the characters just fascinating to me.
Yeah, and you know, one of the comments I get all the time is, I've never watched a cooking show in my life, but I love your show.
Yeah. Yeah,
So, it's not about, we've never described it as a cooking show. We describe it as a show about people and place told through the lens of food.
Yeah. And you also, your cookbook is not just a cookbook. You call it part story, part history, part recipes. And does that go back to your want to write all the way back to NC State and your love for writing?
Yeah, I love, I've always considered myself a storyteller, and I had no desire to write a book of recipes. You know, I feel like you can Google any recipe you want.
Sure.
So the recipes in my book, I wanted them to be related to a bigger narrative, and I wanted the stories to relate to the recipes, and so that was very intentional, and also probably the biggest project of my life.
Well, 580 some pages is a pretty big.
There were 100 more that we cut out.
Really?
Yes.
Along the way, did you start realizing that I've got an Encyclopedia Britannica here? I don't have a cookbook, or I don't have a storybook here.
I had no idea, because I had never done anything like this before, and I did not want to send what I was doing to my editor because I was afraid that he would squash it. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, if I get far enough along in this and I've almost finished and I send it, they're not going to be able to do anything. Right. They're going to have to accept what I've done. And so I just kept writing, and I had this word count. I never thought to put like a page count. I had this word count, and I thought, 380,000 words, that's not many.
380,000.
And I sent the manuscript to my editor, just as it was due, and he was like, whoa, this is too big.
Really?
Yeah, and he said, let me read it, and I'll tell you what we're going to cut. We'll talk about what we have to cut out. And he came back a week later, and he's like, I don't think we're going to cut anything. We eventually had to cut about 100 pages out to have it printed in the United States because of the size of the book and printing presses and things I don't understand.
Sure. And you've kind of taken people along on the book tour with the show. But what's one thing about the book tour that surprised you? I mean, was there anything that was really like, I didn't know I had to do that? Anything about the book tour that really take us behind the scenes?
The relentless pace of it. We had this food truck that was kind of where the party started at every event. And, if something happened with the food truck and we couldn't get to that next event, that was a big deal. And we didn't leave much space in between because I was trying to do a lot in a short period of time. That was difficult. How hard it would be to be away from my kids for that period of time. Mm-hmm. And I had this fantasy that they would be able to come out and join me. Uh-oh. And they did in a few places, but I was working and I was irritable and tired. And so when I do another book tour, it will be different.
What's the next book going to be about? Do you have a theory about it yet?
Yeah, so I'm writing a proposal for a book called Pleasantly Plump, which is about body image and kind of my journey with my own body image and weight, told through recipes. Mm-hmm. So very much the same structure in that it'll be narrative and story driven, and the recipes will relate to that narrative, but it will not be as long.
What do you do to relax? Now, I know with the cameras around, it's probably tough to get time away just to kind of put everything. But you said you love to work and you love the kids. But what does Vivian Howard do just to kind of relax for a bit?
I don't know. I'm not in the relaxation phase of my life.
Okay.
I do. I exercise a lot, and I think that's a great stress reliever.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that. We don't watch. We don't have broadband internet where I live, so we don't have Netflix. So I don't watch a whole lot of the shows that I'd like to watch.
Uh-huh. Not a surfer. I mean, a lot of people have like a hobby to do golf but it sounds to me like you're in the exercise phase.
Yeah, and actually, if you ask Ben, he would say I cook to relax at home. It's like when I'm at home, I am usually working on some kind of meal for the week for the kids, or tinkering on a little project, and cooking at home is much different than cooking in a professional setting. So I would say cooking and exercising.
Do you judge other people's recipes or dishes when you go out for a bite to eat?
No, I'm just grateful that I'm not cooking.
Are you that way?
Yeah, and it's funny, no one ever invites us over to dinner or anything. But in that situation, I would just be very happy to be taken care of for an evening.
Yeah, I imagine that's probably a lot easier than strapping on the apron and getting in the back.
Yes.
Yeah. I appreciate you taking the time. You are so busy and doing everything, and I know the show's going gangbusters, and already got a theory for another book, so I know you're going to be busy doing that. I appreciate you taking the time, and everybody looks forward to Benny's Big Time Pizzeria opening. When are you going to open in Wilmington?
Well, we're waiting on our ABC license.
Okay.
So we're in the space now, working and cooking and tweaking dishes, and we hope that we'll have our soft opening the end of next week or the beginning of the following week. So we're looking at like the week of December 5th.
And you'll be spending some time down here as it opens?
Absolutely.
You like Wilmington?
It's got my name on it.
Yeah, so. I guess so. Yeah. Do you like Wilmington? Do you visit very often? I know now you have a different reason, but were you a frequent visitor to Wilmington?
I've not been a frequent visitor, but I like Wilmington. I like that it's a coastal city, but it's also a city. And I have a really close friend who lives here, and I hope to be able to spend more time with her.
Nice. So. And we hope you'll spend more time in Wilmington. Vivian, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Vivian Howard has a lot on her plate, literally, and there are several ways you can keep up with what she's doing. VivianHoward.com lets you know about Vivian's appearances and the restaurants. ChefsLifeSeries.com keeps you up to date on the TV series, and past episodes are there too. And Benny's Big Time Pizzeria already has a Facebook page. So go to Facebook, look up Benny's Big Time Pizzeria, find out everything about that brand new restaurant opening very soon in the South Front community of Wilmington. Now, as far as that WECT travel mug, here's how you can possibly win yourself one. Leave a rating or a review, whether you listen on iTunes or SoundCloud or Stitcher Radio. Tell me what you think about this week's interview and episode. And then, once you leave that review, take a screenshot of it. Email me the screenshot, jevans@wect.com. I'll pick one at random, and that winner will get that WECT travel mug. And if you know someone who you think would be a good interview for an upcoming episode of the podcast, same email, jevans@wect.com. Let me know, and we'll try to make it happen. I'm John Evans. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of One on One.